Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of What's Next, where we're going to be looking at the world of directing online. And I'm very excited to be hosting two veteran directors here today with us, Peter J. Kuo and Ashley Tata. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. Let me get your mics on here. There we go. So, little quick introductions. Peter joins us all the way from San Francisco. He's a bi-coastal director, although an LA native. Currently serving as the Associate Conservatory Director at American Conservatory Theater, or ACT, where he serves as the Chair of Staff at the EDI Committee. He's a theater director, producer, writer, educator, focusing on the visibility of marginalized communities. So thank you, Peter, for joining us today. And just next to me and above Peter, we got Ashley Tata. It's also director and the designer of multimedia works of theater, contemporary art, contemporary opera, performance, live music, and immersive experience. Her work frequently sits at the intersection of music, installation, and performance, and has been presented in various venues and festivals throughout the US and internationally. The list here is huge. It's going to go LA Opera, Austin Opera, the Miller Theater, Chicago Opera Theater, and she's also has had her shows picked by the LA Times and New York Times for critics' picks. So we're very excited to have her here and get a little conversation going on about this new world of live video theater. So a little beginning of how I kind of stumbled upon these two wonderful people. Once COVID hit in mid-March, I was kind of keeping an eye out there what artists were doing. And Jessica Hanna from LA said, oh, I just saw this amazing show. Peter J. Kuo just did in Love and Warcraft with his students. It just totally reinvented things. I was so excited. And I said, I got to check this out. Now, I couldn't see the video, but Peter was very receptive. I got to talk to him a bit. And I started seeing his name pop up. And in particular, Peter, you wrote an article for HowlRound calling Opening the Screen on Live Video Theater. And for those who don't know, there really was a large schism when this came out and people were really like, oh, is this theater? Oh, no, it's killing theater. Oh, it's just TV. And you wrote this article, and I think it was really well stated. And can you kind of tell our audience a little bit about what you were doing with that?
Yeah, to me, it was very much about just really embracing this as not a replacement for live in-person theater or a replacement for film or television. Like it's a hybrid form, and they're in a certain way a very different artistic form, and something that I think we can hold on to even once this pandemic is over. I think there's something about the art form that is really intriguing that I'm actually looking forward to talking to Ashley about. In that there's this interesting relationship with theater and film and television and the imagination, and something about theater that unlocks imagination in a really exciting way. It forces us to go, yes, that desk that we see 5 times is mother's kitchen table, and also the dining hall of someplace, and then a tabletop for something. Like we imagine that over and over again, where we don't have that kind of relationship in film and television. We kind of have this moment of like, what is that? That glass was half full, and that person didn't take a drink. We expect it to be a little bit more realistic and purposeful. I really kind of look at it as theater uses our reality, acknowledges limitations, and therefore activates the imagination. Where I feel like film and television takes the imagination of the mind, breaks limitation, and mimics reality. Is kind of the way I view it. And so I dive into a lot of that in the article and just kind of getting people on board with this medium, which I think is really fun.
Yeah, I was very thankful to read it. And you kind of coined the term, maybe you picked it up, but live video theater. We got away from Zoom theater, which a lot of people were throwing around. So thinking of the terminology a little different. So I saw that it kind of started the ball rolling like, all right, theater professionals kind of embracing this. And then the New York Times came out after some articles, not necessarily being so supportive, came out with an article in July, early July. This is theater in 2020. Will it last? Should it? And in that article was several critics from the New York Times kind of going back and forth on shows they've seen, some very like highly publicized celebrity type shows, but then some more shows like more theater artists exploring and experimenting. And one of the plays they mentioned was Mad Forest, a play from Romania by Carol Churchill. And I didn't know it at the time. It was later, after Peter had talked to me, that I realized Ashley had done this production. And I got to see a little clip of it. There's a little bit on her website, which I'll show you at the end. I'll show the website at the end. As one of the artists that the New York Times critics were starting to feel like, hey, there's something here that we should be looking at. They were even talking about getting a new critic to cover this, and wouldn't that be amazing? So Ashley, do you want to talk a little bit about that experience and kind of, being established multimedia opera director and all that, and then kind of switching into this online role?
Sure. Well, I think that, first of all, I just wanted to say thanks for taking the time to talk to us about this subject. And Peter, I'm so sorry I missed the How Around article, because it sounds pretty great. So I'll watch that when we're done with this. I mean, read it when we're done with this. But I think that one of the things that was nice to read about in that Times article, and the fact that you're talking about this on this program, is that it is something that I think should be taken seriously as its own kind of art form. And I don't think it's something that will be going away once we're able to be in spaces, whenever that is. Mm-hmm. And I guess the process of moving Mad Forest from an in real life performance, which is where we started. We had 3 weeks of rehearsal in real life before the campus shut down and we had to move remotely. And then the pivot happened really, really quickly. And in the original production design, the video designer was myself. I mean, I was basically going to just throw up some video images and use it as an excuse to try to work a little bit more on video myself. But so there was always the idea of video design, but then becoming fully integrated into the production, and in fact becoming the medium through which the show is told. That was I guess it was a huge change from how we had been designing it, but in my head it all felt kind of the same. So I tend to be someone who, especially depending upon the project, I feel like integrating video and media into the work. I'm an advocate for asking producers to include that as a budget line. It shouldn't be something that I have to request. I mean, like in the same way that you have a lighting designer and that's a given, I feel like a lot of budgets, especially in 2020 and beyond now at this point, that video should just be a given as a design element, because I feel like that's a way that we think about the world and how we process the world, and hyperlinking thinking, all this type of thing is something that we're very accustomed to. And I don't think it's a substitute for scenic design or for lighting design. It should be fully integrated into the medium. And I think that what's really exciting about making, I've been, the terms thing is a conversation that in a lot of ways, I'm not entirely interested in. Like I remember this moment when people were saying, is it theater? And my sense was, fine, you can have the term theater, I don't care. Although then I got angry, and then I really started thinking about it, and I was the jerk who would go back and go, well, if we're talking about a theatron and a seeing space, and a space in which a polis is collected around an event and around an allegorical story so that they can see better the society in which they live, then in fact Mad Forest Peter's production. These are pieces of theater, and
Yeah.
and I started, making up wild hypotheses about, maybe it was only in the beginning of the 20th century when film was invented that theater artists started clinging to this definition of theater as something that's an in-person experience, because they were like, oh, film is doing something, we have to say how we're different,
Yeah.
It was like a panic clinging to something. But I think that so anyway, so now I'm kind of like, I was saying, oh, it's live performance. We will maintain that it is live performance, and they can have theater. But now I kind of keep on saying it's live theatrical cyber performance. Cyber performance is what I'm saying. So that's where I'm at in terms. But I also just I do come back to, it's an interesting question to me of what makes us be able to acknowledge that it is live. And that's the other thing too that I find that's really interesting is we are still holding. I mean, the three of us right now are holding in space and time. I'm in Brooklyn, y'all are on the West Coast, and we are holding in, and all the audience members who are tuning in from wherever they are, we are holding in space and time and energy that we do share. And I believe that is true and that's palpable. And there may be delay and all this type of stuff that's perceived in different ways, but there's something that is really special about that. And so I've been getting a little, I don't know. I've been starting to think that maybe an initial rejection of this type of work is that we do create sacred spaces, which are the theater, the theatrical space, and there is something that feels sacrilege about trying to create that in this thing, and something that's for conferencing, and that's very that doesn't seem to have been endowed with that sense of the sacred. So I've been thinking a lot about how we can defy that and determine that this actually is in its own way a sacred space because of the joining together and a need to tell a story and communicate that to an audience and create also a community within an audience who will be tuning in. So but the actual move, I don't know. I didn't feel like it was a huge shift. That's all I can say about that. To me, it didn't feel like, it was just like, here are these problems now, let's figure those out. And that seems to always be the case, right? So yeah. And I got to see I saw Peter's work as well, right, in the midst of all this. And it was I was so grateful to see what he was taking, it was really, it was really like looking at these frames and looking at the dimensionality and taking the thing seriously, Yeah.
Well said, and I'm glad you did. Both of you guys jumped in and played with this. Ashley, I'm just going to ask you to quickly check your microphone. I'm getting a little pop. Maybe just check, make sure the connection's all in there. It's not so annoying, but I figure it's worth a bring up. Let's get into the heart of it. I think you guys have both kind of mentioned this, or we've talked about it. It's come up. Or rather, Ashley kind of started this conversation. What is the actual artistic value of all this? Like, it is theater, so whether it's theater or not, what's the artistic value of it? And how is this online, cyber, virtual theater, all that different than what you've already been working? So how would you both kind of look at that in terms of its artistic value and what it's doing?
Well, that's interesting because I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this, Ashley. Because for me, I don't know about what when you were working. So yours was intended to be an in-person production, right? And mine was as well. But we didn't actually have any in-person rehearsal before it got started. It was full on virtual the whole time. But I had this curiosity of when that transition happened. It sounds like you went through the same thing that I did. It was like, oh, we're doing it online now? Great, okay. And just boom, 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 let's do it. And at the end of our process, when the audience came watching, like the response to it was insane. And I imagine that was maybe true for you too. And at one point I was having a post show with my my actors, and one of the actors turned to me and said, did you know that you were creating this like crazy, insane, like new thing, blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, I thought everyone was going to be doing this. I hadn't realized that there are just so few of us who could wrap our heads around this hybrid kind of medium. I don't know if you were thinking the same thing.
Well, I think so. I guess so, because we did the performance at Bard, and then right immediately after we closed the performance at Bard, Jeffrey Horowitz from Theater for New Audience called Gideon Lester and said, I want to present that. So the next morning I had a conversation with Jeffrey, and we were already talking about an off-Broadway transfer, which was complete madness. And so, and my conversation with Jeffrey, at first he said, well, what we can do is we could just stream the capture of that performance. And I said, and I was already after the first broadcast wondering, what is the UX? Like, what is the experience of an audience? How can create a lobby? How do we make this maybe a little less anonymous so that it's not just the loudest voices on the YouTube chat who get all the attention like that? No offense to the loudest voices, keep chatting, everybody. But I was already kind of thinking in how do we make this a legitimate form that continues, that keeps what we, I don't know, maybe what I like about theater very personally, but I guess my priorities when we first did Mad Force Online was I felt a huge responsibility to the student performers, to the young people who were going home, who were in it, everything. I mean, everybody was in shock, right? And I mean, that's the thing that I also have to remember about that moment is there was a lot of just, everything being upended, and the realization that, the grownups have no idea what's going on, and they never have, and we've all been faking it for their whole lives, right? So there, and to me, it was really, in my life, theater has always come through for me, and it's the place that I go. It's, since as young as I can remember, it's the thing that I go to when I'm stressed out, blah, blah, blah. And I wanted to have that kind of space, keep that space open for them, and that was really important. And then it was really important for them, and also for the artists who, at this point, everybody's work had been canceled, right? Because that's the other thing that was going on. Everybody's productions, like my whole 21 was canceled in a weekend, right? So having work for these designers, so that, and then making something that felt like it could be considered legitimate, so that we could, to me, it's an existential crisis. Like, I can't just not work for a year or whatever this is going to take. I need the gigs. So it was trying to figure out how we create a form that would be taken seriously by ourselves. And then, so Bard happened, and it seemed that we had achieved that. And then when Tafana came along, my sense was that now the next step is to make sure that we create something that will be taken seriously by an audience. And the Theater for New Audience is a subscription audience, and I felt like it would be necessary to create something that in some way approximated what it's like to have a theatrical experience, meaning that it could be new every night, it could be different every night, there could be a disaster every night. And can we actually construct a show where we have a call time for the actors, where we have notes afterwards, all these type of things, and so we did 3 other performances, and we did them at all different times of day, because the other thing I was wondering is, can we reach an international audience in a way that we never get to in theater? And so our final showing was a Wednesday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern, and I think we had 15,000 viewers, and they were literally all over the world. We had people from Romania giving us notes about the costume choices, right? Like, which was so great. And to me, and so I left that experience way at the beginning of this going, well, producers are going to line up. Somebody's going to figure out how to make money on this. And then this is what we'll just do until we're able to go. And it's been really, and so I pushed for that move to Tafana to happen sooner rather than later, because I'd seen your piece, and Katie Pearl had done another piece as well, had done the Method Gun online, which I thought also was really fantastic. It was a fantastic, use of the medium and interest in what theater can be, what theatrical performance is in this medium. And so I was a bit, it's that thing of this competition, right? And I was like, listen, this learning curve, it's going to take off really fast. So like, we have to do this right now before other people do what, and it's been kind of, and I've seen, there's another, Joshua William Gelb is doing Theater in Quarantine, which is another, he and Katie Rose are doing these pieces that are also really interesting. And of course, like Free Theater of Belarus did that piece, which I thought was fantastic. And Gob Squad did a 12-hour broadcast also that was really amazing. But really, it's been a bit surprising to me that there isn't a continued push of, what are the design elements of this? What is what is kind of native to this form that we can use, and that we can push the envelope of, and that we can own that this is not actually theater. I mean, I have and I guess I'm in the middle of having a conversation with somebody about a music experience, and we can't not have latency right now. Like that's just not it's just not going to happen. And there's also there's a lot involved in that. And so if we're trying to approximate what a choral experience is, then we're only going to be disappointed and depressed, as opposed to saying there's a musical form, there are aleatoric forms, there are counter forms, there are things that don't require a real, anyway, you can design with the restrictions. And so that's what I continue to be really interested in. And I think as far as the what the form has to offer artistically, I guess one of the other reasons why why it seemed like a natural move to me is that it's in some ways my favorite types of art. It's it's like weird for me, the ones that I'm engaged in making, it's like weird video art, weird performance art, and theater. And so that's like all those things combined is the type of stuff that I'm interested in creating. And I think that other people might be interested in experiencing that, and it also has this advantage of the audience reach, which I think is for all theater makers who have friends who go into film, and you look at like all the cinemas that they're playing at and you're saying, oh my gosh, your work is reaching that many people, and we go, I'm on the soft Broadway contract and maybe 300 people a night see it for a month. Like, it's pretty exciting to think that many people are tuning in, of course, I guess they might be distracted, but
that's also inherently in the medium too, right? That's what's interesting, that there's some ability to actually engage people beyond just sitting and watching. Like you can sit and watch and actually possibly be doing something else that could be integrated into the whole experience. To me, the live chat was huge on that. It was really about like, well, in normal theater, we're used to sitting, watching, applauding, and like there are appropriate responses. But, in our production of In Love and Warcraft, what was fascinating to me was when you got full-on Team Ryan, Team Raoul people going, and it was just like, whoa. So there are people who are like now siding with certain characters, and then there's debate in the chat, and then there's this whole interesting conversation about asexuality that one person was like, I have no idea what that is. And there was an education lesson going on while people were watching the show, and it was like a learning moment that was contextualized in the artistry right away. It was suddenly this kind of like, here's the study guide while you're watching, and so you can contextualize all of it. No, I agree with you. I'm surprised. I felt that same urgency. ACT is remounting the show, and we're remounting in a month, and we're doing the same. We're doing 4 shows, but I had that same thing. It was like, we need to put this up now because everyone else is going to figure this out. And I say this, and I hope it doesn't sound like arrogant, but I was just like, because I think it's not that difficult to kind of piece it together. But I go back to, I think you have all this really amazing experience. I 10 years ago started a YouTube channel, and I was used to making videos, talking to myself on videos, blocking eyeline, working camera angles, and doing all those things. So I had built this experience in my head already that when it came to making this transition, I was like, oh yeah, let's just do it. And so I think for you and me, we did have this ton of experience that was relevant to be able to make this medium work without realizing that I hadn't realized that was what was coming into play until after it all got put together.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, I guess I also feel like it's important to underline that it's it was great once I met with the performers right before, at the beginning of the rehearsal process for the Tafana. We had a week of tech, and even in that, those 3 weeks, they had all done their senior projects, and they had already started thinking about what the camera means, what the performer's relationship to the camera is, what editing means, what all these different things. And so I don't think, it is definitely, the curve is there. And when I work with students now, part of what I do, I go into I say, look, this is all the kind of software that I have, or these are the things that I have here. This is what it is. Please teach me how to do it better, because I had somebody send me the TikTok videos that I should watch so that I didn't have to actually sign on to TikTok, that's because I feel like aesthetically there's something really there that I must know about, and there's a vocabulary there that should be integrated and everything, but I don't think that I'm going to go, well, we'll see what happens. Maybe I never will. but I'm very committed to the fact that other people are going to teach me more about this than I can. Again, it was just like, I feel like I was in a, the team was in a really fortunate position of, we had an institution behind us that said, we will produce this, and that was very rare, as it turned out. And I was able to kind of convince the team to go along with it, to go, well, how do you do lighting design for this? Don't you want to do that instead of your plot? And people were game. Also, nobody had work. But the other thing is, I also really did. I have been, and I continue to be really not just sensitive to, but very respectful of everybody who's also taking this period to slow everything down and to not produce.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I really hope that we learn from this, I keep on thinking of, what is it that COVID can teach us? Like, how is it being our teacher? And one of the many things is to bring back the dignity of time to the process. Because I definitely, and I have yet to actually experience that in any of these COVID pieces that I've made, even, but I feel like it's something that that maybe as a community we can start really insisting upon. So I have, so I'm really excited about the people who are taking a lot of time to do. I work with this duo, Paul Pinto and Jeff Young, and they've
Paul,
yes. Oh, great. Oh, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Paul did music.
He did the sound for it. Yeah.
And they have kind of this, and Thing NY is also a group that they're with, and I've been, it's been super inspiring to watch them as an ensemble really just think of this as a landscape for experimentation and going into the lab on a regular basis and just coming up with things and then making something of that. So that's the kind of process that I'm really excited about, and I feel like the theater, the institutions being shut down, and the institutions as it were. And this is what I was really surprised about, is that it doesn't seem like there's a lot of, putting money into really producing this work. Right. And that's to me been like a big frustration, because, and again, circling back to kind of the beginning of this, is why I am, strangely, I'm grateful to the Times and that panel of critics for taking this seriously, because it has to start somewhere, and my feeling is that until there's an actual vaccine, we'll have to be very flexible. I mean, we may get you can go into the theater in a month, and then somebody on the staff gets COVID, and then everybody has to go inside again, and so we'd have to just to have productions that are ready to go online, or audiences will start to accept basically that they might get canceled all the time. So I feel like just everybody has to start thinking in these terms so that we can survive as a class of artists, What you said, so you had these YouTube. I mean, I thought that the thing that I've been thinking a lot about too is, what are the stories that are really, what are the stories that this medium really, really tells? And I thought it was so great. I mean, Love and Warcraft, I was like, oh, this is fantastic, and so it was so fantastic using the different relationship to camera that you were able to in this. And so when I saw the first thing, again, like my experience of watching it was like, oh, okay, I see, it's direct to camera. Sure. And then all of a sudden they're like, and then they're with each other, and there's the same scenic element from place to place. Like, I mean, did you ship that to the Yeah.
So basically, a lot of it was just like, we can Amazon order that same product to two different people and just have it shipped there and shipped there. And so then it was funny, because our production manager actually didn't understand when I was first articulating that, because it's interesting, when you had your show and you had your talkback, I was like, there was a team behind the show. For us, when we scaled it down, our ACT is not affiliated with the university, so we don't have the same resources as a university. And so it was like, okay, let's scale it all down. And most of my designers got cut. The only designer I got was still a sound designer. And so it was kind of like, I could still use all those other people. No? Okay, well, let's just figure this out. And it was that kind of, our production manager was essentially our set designer, was buying the things, but I was telling him what I wanted, is that I need posters for here and here. And he ordered everyone different posters. And as soon as they pulled them out around tech, I was like, wait, no. We need them to be the same. So he went and rush ordered a couple of them that we can get them lined up. And in my head, it was always like, how do I create the illusion of shared space? That's what I really want to create. To the point, I think some people are actually like, are they in the same place, or why are you using two computers? Which was really interesting. And the way it's funny, I reference your show too to folks, because to me it's almost like two sides of the same coin, where mine, I think I was leaning more in this kind of, how do I recreate in-person reality? And yours embraced like a cinematicness of the live element that was really kind of awesome and cool, that to me sits on polar opposites but lives in the same form that we're playing with, and gives a different artistic aesthetic that builds a different artistic experience for the audience at the same time, yet are extremely valid and exciting. I don't know if you've thought about like that kind of relationship in a certain way to those mediums.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, and again, I think that the what's exciting to me is to see a work that acknowledges the obstructions of whatever it is, whether it's Zoom or whatever whatever service you're using, and takes that into consideration and builds an integrated aesthetic for that and around that, because I think that what there seems to be a lot of, there are some experiences that I've engaged in where it feels like there's, and also I think this was maybe earlier and we're moving out of this, this is becoming the new normal, but there was this real sense of moroseness for a while that was, kind of like you move into the space and you're already defeated by the technology. And it's like, kind of trying to show why the live thing would have been so much better, as opposed to, again, this is just a different thing. This is the thing that we'll be doing while we're in this COVID bardo, and that's okay, I think that, I'm a pretty, I don't know. I do watch a lot of movies. I really like to watch movies, like, and I do. That's definitely a part of how my brain, how I see things and how I put things together. So I wasn't really thinking about, it just seems like and again, and this is why, different artists have different points of view, and why all of them, why all of it is, why all of these are valid, because they're really asking the question, what is this medium and what does it have to offer? But clearly we have very different ways of obviously seeing how this thing works, Right. And so for me, it's obvious that, like, I would like to have the ability to switch, and I would like to be able to cut camera to camera and have, like, this means a group view, or, what do we, I'm sick and tired of this frame. How can I get a different frame? What is it to have, how can we choreograph a dance in this space? And all these things. And so now what's exciting right now is there's a group of people who we're continuing to conduct these experiments. And so it's basically, I'd like to be able to move, to have control over where a person's square is in the grid. I'd like to have control over the size of the square. I'd like to have control over whether it is a square, and then we just kind of like create wish lists, and then this other group of artistic coders really go about trying to see what we can rupture, So, and that to me too is about kind of is a fundamental part of working with technology. Mm-hmm. Is that, for me, what I always find interesting is you go to the edge, or the artists who I find really inspiring who have historically worked with technology, it has to do with, you bring the tech to the edge of where it functions, and then you try to break it. And then that's where the human element is able to insert itself. And that's where I think it becomes a piece that an artist is having more of a hand in, Mm-hmm. So like the gating on Zoom is a really fun breaking point of technology that composers can like play with,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Have you thought of other pieces that, I mean, I guess you're in the middle of remounting, so maybe you haven't, but again, I'm very interested in this thing of because I've thought about like pieces that maybe, it was also an amazing coincidence that, I mean, to me, it's an amazing coincidence that you were planning on doing Love and Warcraft, and then that works really well online. And Mad Forest, weirdly, as a piece that historically has to do with how television shaped a revolution, I mean, it really worked, like dramaturgically it worked. And at one point, I've talked about this with Gideon, who, at one point I was going to be doing Orestes, and I don't think we would have done the production online if I were to be doing Orestes. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just don't know that it would have transferred.
It's interesting. I feel like with the kind of artistic creativity to really embrace, okay, we're not trying to recreate this as a theatrical live in-person experience. One could take almost any play and kind of deliver it through this medium and make it work. I don't know if it's actually been announced yet, but like I am working on a piece or one of the shows that will be online for the MFA program is going to be another online similar. I'm going to be directing it, but it has nothing to do with the online. In fact, internet, I don't think it didn't exist at the time period of this play. And so I'm excited about that in the same way that I think, Mad Forest in relation to TV and yet not fully in this online element yet, you were able to execute that. To me, because I think the audience is used to it through television and film already, that how do we tap into that aesthetic that already goes, great, I'm a screen and I'm watching someone. And the thing that I like that brings it to the theatrical element for me is I love when we could have multiple people constantly being online, whether they're the focus or not, for that audience ability to go, I'm gonna watch this person, even though I know the storytelling is focused here, or I'm gonna look at this other element. And less, for me, kind of less being like, this is exactly what I want the audience to see sort of thing. I still, similar to what you said, like, I still want to control where the squares are. I want to give that hint of that, but there's something in that is really intriguing to me. And so, other place I have thought about, though, that could actually elevate the piece, like the Nether, I've been thinking about, could be really, really exciting in this medium. There's something I want to do, which I think it helps replace the difficult tech part of that show, but could be really interesting, is 10 out of 12. Just in that whole sense of like everyone could be on, like the audience is essentially listening to headset while still watching the experience. And if you just get to go to cameras in a theater, how fascinating is that kind of thing? There's an element of covering that voyeuristic, let me make the audience conscious that they're spying on someone versus how do we let them forget that they're watching this through a screen. And I think that's a balance that you can take to every single production and every single play.
Yeah, it strikes me as you say that, though, that it's interesting because, what you were started talking about that, I mean, theater is an inherently poetic space in which we see the world via allegory. So, and there's something in TV film that makes us feel initially feel more literal about it. Although there are obviously examples in both media who break that and rupture that. But it's because I keep on coming up against when I talk about pieces that could work online, and I'm talking about writers from centuries ago. And for the Orestes thing, by the way, has to do actually with the Greek chorus. Like that's like we could solve the problem, but I just would like not be as interested in it. That's really so anyway, but it is interesting that we keep on coming back to having to justify why this technology makes sense in the world of this play as it was imagined potentially by the writer, even though we never ask that question when we're putting video design in. I mean, we should, I think, consider the question, but frequently, it's like the video design is just there, and it doesn't matter that this was a period in which there would be no video, or there wouldn't be like, these kind of lighting, like we wouldn't have this color light. I mean, like all these things, like it's interesting to me how in some ways this is making us remember the ways in which we can be taken out of an experience, right? In a way that we've come to very easily accept. I'm going into a theater. This is the situation. These are the trappings of a theater, and therefore I'll ignore all these. In some ways, it's like a weird. It's like in this kind of Brechtian moment where we can say, "Oh, this is exposing all the things that we have just blithely accepted about the theatrical setup."
Right. Well, and I think so. That's interesting because one of the things that I was just talking to someone else about was, well, when we were talking about, okay, well, when people see the show, we're going to need to offer some guidelines of like, if you want to chat, pop the chat out, move it to the side. If you, because of Zoom's weird algorithm with the screen blocking, if you're on a MacBook Pro, you have to kind of resize your screen a little bit to get the maximum effect of this. When we're doing when we're doing share screen, you want to go in side by side mode, like instructing people like best viewing practices of the work. And someone was like, oh, that's just teaching people a whole new medium, and we just don't have to do that in theater. I'm like, we did when we were first exposed to it. You knew you had to get there at a certain time, to get there early, to get to your seat, that you were going to get a program, that there was an usher who was going to be there. Like, we had built in these customs in doing a live in-person experience already. And so if we're talking about attracting new audience even to a live theater experience, this, in a certain way, it's flipped now. There are people who are used to consuming this work in this manner already, and that's the younger generation that we all want to tap into, right? If you want them to learn, the live in-person, like, theater experience rules of whatever those are, we can expect it the other way around as well. As that, great, those who used to go to the theater, how do we get them into this medium as well?
Right. I mean, and that's and in some ways too. You're talking about the ritual, which is also that kind of creation of a sacred space. Goes hand in hand with that, and I think that it's all this thing about the chat too. I mean, it just also makes me wonder. Or a question for you is have are you someone who is versed in gaming culture or anything like that? Yeah. And how do you see the people who for me there is a conscious effort to I've again, it's like kind of like it's all like anthropological experiments. Like I go on Twitch and I go, oh, okay, wow, and then I like take it away and go, well, in Twitch they do da 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 da, right? So I think that there's an interesting the chat feature in the theatrical experience was more closely to me what brings out like everybody's inner Twitch audience person, I don't know what does that, or I don't know if they're gamers who are tuning in, but I don't know. I'm just interested in your experience of all that.
Well, I feel like it's here's the interesting thing. I've, having been immersed in social media, done some of the Twitch-like stuff. I didn't actually do Twitch, but something very similar before Twitch existed. Instagram Live, I was also running social media for South Coast Repertory for a number of years when I was back in administration. And I learned these very strong skills and tools of social media. How is that extremely different as a marketing tool? What does it mean to build engagement? What does it mean to have a relationship with your audience in a really fascinating way that I learned from theater, but also was this kind of, you can't just do it. Like so many people I know who are just like, I'm just going to start my own Twitch channel, get going. And having witnessed it, watched it, there's this engagement with the audience, being aware of that, making sure your commentary lives in a place that still informs the audience, doesn't dumb them down, but also doesn't run over things, that there's that constant engagement while you're still activating your brain, your body, and all these other things that is so fascinating about how you build community in that way. The audience has to become part of that equation and conversation. And interesting enough, more traditional theater has kind of separated the audience out and been, this is how you engage with it, and these are your only options. And this is kind of starting to break that a little bit. So that's something really exciting to me.
Just to take that moment, and I'm loving this. Thank you both for I feel like I'm fly on the wall of this great conversation. I do want to engage. We've got several questions that are coming out over the chat. And so to bring in that engagement, I'm going to throw some of these out there. So we've got one here from Brad Godesman. Enjoying the conversation so far. How is your collaboration affected by the current state of working? Want to see that again?
Yeah, sure. I guess I'm just the current
state of all this isolation.
The pandemic.
Let's say it. Let's say
the
it.
pandemic in the room.
Yeah.
I don't. It's interesting. I mean, how is it affected? Well, so I'll say, just from in the tech process, for example, I will say that what was a really interesting thing to learn, and I'll say this because I think that it's really important for people to take this with them. It takes as long to tech a show online, if not longer, than when you're in an actual theater. And so when I'm working with production managers right now, I say, please make a production calendar as if we were doing a real grown-up theater piece, because I know we all have Zoom fatigue, and I know it's all exhausting and everything, and everybody says, I can't imagine being on my computer for a 10 out of 12, but you really can. I've done it a couple of times now. And part of the reason is that you can't have overlapping conversations. I mean, you can go out into a breakout room or whatever and have an offline conversation, but it's not the thing, but you don't, again, have the sense of the space in the room and an awareness of this conversation is winding down. I need to start focusing on that again, or I can be watching the light focus while I'm talking and looking over the shoulder of the video designer. I mean, you just can't, there's no simultaneity anymore. So that is really labor intensive in a whole other way. And then I would say that I'm finding that when I'm talking to the other thing is acknowledging that we all at every state of the theatrical process have have decades of experience, however much experience. But for me, it's become even more important to be working with collaborators and an entire production team who are willing to say we need to learn everything again, and are actively engaged and fascinated by that process. As far as the state of doing kind of remote work with designers who I'm working with, I mean, I guess the sad thing is that, I'm pretty used to doing a lot of the initial stages of design somewhat remotely, and then have being strategic about when we do studio visits and things like that. And so now, because it's all, because the product, or the design itself exists online, I don't have to wait for a studio visit to see what it will be like, right? I can just say, send me the PDF or send me the JPEG of whatever the background is, and there it is. But the other thing I'll say is that what I also think it's important for producers to acknowledge and for performers to accept is that whereas the theater housed the infrastructure and therefore to some extent the cost of what that infrastructure brings with it, the performers are now, that's all being given out to the performers. So for example, I've had experiences where a performer's internet wasn't ideal, and that should be a production cost now. And in the other situation, the theater would have you'd be paying for that internet because you're renting the theater or you have the theater. So that I think that that's the other thing is, I mean, this is now largely less about. Sorry, I'm not even answering the question anymore. Sorry, I don't know what to say about. I'm just grateful that I have collaborators who are keenly interested in this work. So I don't know. They're all learning new stuff. The scenic designer I work with is learning how to render things in 3D and in gaming engines and all this type of stuff for other projects that we're now working on. So everybody, I'm just in the midst of a lot of people who are really engaged in figuring out what we can do, and that is exciting.
Yeah.
But I think you're right in the conversation that you were starting to head to, which I think is right, is the collaboration is different but the same. Is the weird way to put it, in the sense of what we're aiming for the most part, there's a language and a knowledge base that can be taken from and utilized, but how it gets executed is just a little bit different. And what we're really leaning, I think one of the things you're starting to lean on, which is why I wish Actors Equity would actually start to get involved in this conversation a little bit more, is that a lot of it leans on those actors. And I think that's okay, but we just have to be thoughtful of how we build them into the collaboration, because we're still going to need those designers. We're still going to need some wardrobe people. We're still going to need people who know how to instruct these actors on how to do these things themselves. I'm just thinking about like putting a wig on, and it's like, I know some actors who like, I have no idea what to do. But if you had someone online with them every single day, walking them through that process and making sure it's on right, they don't have to think about it, so that they can just still prepare for the show while they're just going through the motions of those things. And yet, yes, the actors are being asked to do a little bit more labor. Therefore, there should be some acknowledgement and compensation from that. There is both an equitableness that needs to be addressed of access of like, yes, suddenly we can include more people in this collaboration. We have more people for audience, but what are the restrictions? Someone who has a space that is bigger, that we can do a bunch of things in, is going to be more desirable to me as a casting person than someone who only has like a tiny bedroom in a household of 3 other people who may not be okay with them putting on a show. Like suddenly that becomes a question of this factor. And I've actually started thinking like, should we be compensating those people to be like, hey, pay a little bit more of your rent. That's going to come out of our fee. That's like a rental fee for us of renting your home. That other 2 people like, no, on these dates and times, I can't go in the living room because it's being used for a show.
Right.
But if it's knocking out their rent, I think people will be more amenable to those kinds of things.
Yeah, I have to toss in there, and something that Ashley brought up too. It seems like a re-education of producers, that we've got to teach them like how to look at this as a different market, how to make different money here. There is this wider audience, smaller micro economy. Maybe they can make some more money, and then how they spend that money. I'm not writing a big check for the rent of a theater space. How do I divide that up, be fair? And it seems something that producers need to start getting educated on. Okay, let me go to another question here. Whoa, this keeps bouncing around. Jonathan Harris, curious to hear your takes on the aesthetic difference, the aesthetic distant differences between live theater and performance online, or is that even the point anymore? Otherwise known as Ezra Buzzington.
I think I'm not clear on the question. Curious.
Your aesthetic difference between live theater. I guess just in terms of you're kind of going into the earlier part of the conversation, I think, in terms of how you're using the different technology and art to create an aesthetic environment, and that difference that you're finding between doing it online versus in a real space.
I guess I would say that there are shows that are live theater that are broadcast, like live in HD, these type of things, or everything that we watched in the first couple of months of the pandemic when we were like, ooh, I can watch everything in Germany that's ever been made. But that's still, but that is taking, or even, Hamilton, but that's taking a theatrical performance that is performed live. He had an answer. He
had a response.
Oh, great. Oh, great. Good.
Organic. Online is virtual. I guess I don't know if I inherently feel that an online medium is not organic in a certain way. Like, I guess I get it in the sense of I'm receiving a visual, and I'm receiving light and sound waves in a very different way than while I was in person. Right? Like if Ashley and I are in the same room, I'm taking in the light that's bouncing off of her and into my eyes, versus I'm right now taking in the light that's bouncing off of her into her camera through my screen and into my eyes. And yes, it adds an extra filter, but it's still organic in the sense that I feel like I'm seeing you and how you're responding and able to respond off of that.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing too that I've become very aware of is the organic experience that each of the performers have in their spaces. Talk about differences in geography and such, but there's some of these performers are in LA, and and being in the Northeast while we were working, didn't realize. There were serious heat concerns that had to go into and that also produces. That was an interesting thing that you couldn't really control, where out of 8 performers, 3 of them are soaking in sweat at the end of a movement, and the other 7, you know what I mean? So there, I mean, there are organic differences between each of the performers and in their spaces. And I do think that there is room for organic. I mean, if we're talking about kind of a sense of improvisation, you know, I mean, I think that what's amazing is that this stage manager who I worked with in particular on Mad Forest, Vanessa Hart, she still had to engage in the process of calling a show with that kind of, I mean, you know, you need to have a sense of the metabolism of all the performers, right? And it's like when I've worked with, you know, when I work with the stage managers who are off stage because they must breathe with the opera singer, right? And so Vanessa figured out, I mean, she now has this setup, most recent thing, she's like added new headsets so that she can basically have 4 different ears going, so she can listen to all these different lines of communication. It's really, it's insane. But through all of that, she does figure out, how can I breathe with, even with the latency, acknowledging, like they also do this test where they know what the delay is. So they're a little bit closer to understanding that, so they can anticipate, so the call can be anticipated in a way. So all of that, I still think, and I think that is what contributes to a real sense of this thing is happening live, even if we're not as aware of the mechanism as maybe we would be in a live theater, or even if we're not actually breathing the same air together, you know?
Right. Well, and something you were saying earlier too about, like, we could watch Hamilton, we could watch all these shows, and this is maybe a little bit different, or towards the question that Ezra was asking. To me, what I feel like people sometimes forget is when you're watching a recording of what was a live performance, you're watching an audience watch a show. You're not taking it in yourself. You are, but you're also being influenced. It's why sitcoms added laugh tracks at some point. It's influencing you to recognize certain things. And it's also why when many of us do comedies, we're like, we need someone to break that laughter ice. Because the moment that surge comes from the group, then there's a release that happens among folks. And I noticed that, you know, that even for me, when I go to a film and it's a packed house, especially if I'm watching like a horror film, I will laugh more when I'm watching that in the theater with other people, because we laugh at the moments that the entire room gets scared, where I would never laugh at that when I'm watching Insidious at home by myself, you know?
Yeah, I mean, what you, and I just started to think of how in tune we are to wanting to be cued by that canned audience, knowing that they're in the can, as opposed to when, you know, one of the reasons that it was important for me to have the chat. And again, and I mean, I'm actually one who as an experiment, I've done the thing where I will watch a show and go, okay, I'm going to be someone who chats all the time. And I really don't like the experience. I really don't like myself afterwards. Like, it's a very personal thing. I'm just like, I can't believe I said all that, you know, in the middle of the show. Right. So I actually am, but I think it's really important. And I think that a lot of people, and I do think it creates a sense of community for sure. I think that's really, necessary and exciting, and there is a way that then people are encouraged to take ownership of the fact that they're the first viewer in a way, you know, or they're viewing it in real time, and so they're curating the experience for everybody else, because you can feel that too, even if nobody's participating in the chat. You can tell, I don't know, you can get a sense of a feeling that, you know, oh, this is going pretty well, right? Or people are digging it, or, you know, I can you know, I mean, the other thing that's interesting is you can see the viewer count. You start to go, oh, when we lagged for 5 seconds or whatever, we lost 20 viewers, you know? So that, I mean, it's really interesting that you're still, and I guess that's the other thing too, that makes it feel like there's something organic about this, you know, this online performance, is because you also still get a sense that the thing is being held, and it's a very tenuous holding. And and the ball can drop in a real way, in the same way that it can happen in theater. And you don't want, I mean, the rhythm of the thing too, you know, that's a whole skill that I think also is a mark of a piece that's being more or less successful in this medium. And I will say one other thing that I've been thinking about that too, is that it also seems to me that the works that I've seen that feel that I am more emotionally connected with in this medium are works that, you know, what I've said about, and this is again just kind of like a thing that I'm working out in a lot of ways, so let's try it out. But when I've talked about live theater, it's that we are our foundational media are time and space, and we're executing an action in time and space. And I think that there's something that is added in the online thing, which has to do with people who are really trying to connect, right? And so it has to do with this reaching out, and that's another thing where in your production, for example, the looking at the camera. If the whole performance happens, I mean, if we were to do a performance where the three of us are in a scene right now, I, as an audience, actually don't know where I am physically. I don't know where I am because you're all looking at this camera, and I now have no dimensionality, as opposed to and that's another thing, another consideration for this aesthetic. So I think that it to me, you can palpably, and that's what was what we had on our side for Mad Forest, is it was really these performers who, we talked a lot about having to cast your friend who you just saw 3 weeks ago right there, and they're right there, and then you cast an action to them, and that can be felt, and I think that that's an emotion that really carries, and it's really appropriate for right now. Yeah.
Okay, nice. All right. Well, thank you for the clarity, Ezra, out there with your question. I've got one more question. It's kind of a two-parter. It may lean a little bit more towards playwright, but maybe from your director's eye, kind of answering this. From Stacy Demalski, when you write for this medium, what do these scripts look like? Are they movie or theater scripts? And the follow-up is, how do you indicate the different scenes or tiles or the chat? Like, as a director, do you have any insight? Now that you've been working with it, could you kind of address, are these movie scripts? Are they theater scripts? Is it a new kind of script that's happening here?
That's interesting, because I'm adapting A Christmas Carol for ACT to turn it into a radio play. We're not going to be doing it like a live video, which is sad, but I'm really excited about this. And ACT has done the same adaptation of Carol for the past 13 years, and I basically helped them remount last year's production. And it's it's very family, it's very pageantry, it's very you've got 20 some kids and all the MFA students and actors and professional actors all working together. It's just really intergenerational thing. But now as I'm writing the piece, I find myself kind of directing while I'm writing, in the sense of, we're not going to see that, or that is going to not be possible. How do I already build in what can be possible? But I think that's me as the director already. I like when a writer doesn't fully think about those things, and they go, oh, and suddenly the room fills with blood. And you're like, I'm going to have to figure that out. Okay, let's do it. So in a certain way, I almost want to say, learn the medium of what is capable, but don't feel restrained by it. Because we'll figure that out, or we'll figure out a creative way around that, if that makes sense. It's weird to me the way when I see television and film scripts versus plays, where I'm like, I don't think the formatting doesn't feel necessary for the formatting to be so different. I also haven't spent a lot of time in TV and film world, so to be fair, but I don't know if there needs to be that much thought and over caution when it comes to writing, and specifically aspects of scenes, titles, and chat, if that makes sense.
All right, nice.
I don't know, Ash, if you have a thought.
Yeah.
I mean, the piece. I mean, I wrote one piece for an online medium that happened a few weeks ago, and then Mad Forest. It was Churchill's script. I mean, the joke that I was making was that I had to reblock that show 3 times. But the blocking when we went online, what I prepared for that process was a cut. I mean, I indicated exactly, I assigned a camera to each performer, and I wrote, through the screen, cut to camera 1 on this line, cut to camera 2 on this line, cut to camera 3 on this glance, cut to camera 7 on this line. So the mixer had that. And then when we go into Act 2, which is that big movement sequence, I'm doing the live edit of that. Like they toss it over to me, so I'm editing between the all the gestural vocabulary. So it's, I guess part of the thing is it's so new that I have yet to read a script that has been written for this medium specifically. I'm very interested in it. If you have them, please send, because I think it's good. I think that, I keep on going. Especially at the beginning of this, I went back to when the plague was happened in London, when Shakespeare was writing and they couldn't perform, after that plague, because the young players passed, and so they were able to take the Blackfriars Theater, and so the architecture of Shakespeare's work foundationally changes after they move inside. And in this way, and I think that in this way, the architecture of playwrights' plays will foundationally change because of the architecture of this space. And so I'm really interested in what comes from writers moving forward. So, but I guess to answer the question, I would say that, I storyboard usually anyways, whether it's theater or something that's more filmic. So that, so having the text and then as my kind of terrible sketches alongside, like that's how my scripts look anyways. So I don't know, but the chat, that's interesting. I mean, that's a good idea. I did the last piece that I wrote. We needed to have simultaneous storylines, and I didn't really do a good job of making that clear to anybody. These things happen simultaneously.
But I think that aspect though is something that I'm really intrigued by. I think we've already lived in a world where that kind of exists to a degree, where there's an audience engagement, immersive experiences, but some of the things that you create are actually like the fact that there is a cognitive awareness, that there's a flexibility with the audience and the engagement with them that can either influence or shape a little bit of what's going on in the main storyline. And to me, that you could do that in this medium much more openly and in a very exciting way that brings them into the conversation of the art on a much more visceral level. Knowing when something is happening live and watching that it's happening live, just it engages everyone in that kind of adrenalistic way that like something could go wrong, anything could go wrong, anything could happen in a off chance, and why not lean into that?
Right. Yeah.
All right. Well, great questions, everyone. Great answers. I have a few. We could keep doing this for hours and hours, and this screams like part 2. So we'll discuss later. But just some points I want to hit on that both of you brought up as kind of wrap points. You both mentioned, and I know I felt it as well, and a lot of artists I talked to, this urgency that everybody's going to do this, that everybody's going to be coming out with it. And I really felt this last month, like I'm waiting to see, and Pasadena Playhouse just announced that they're going to do a streaming service with theater companies and a subscription-based theater. I just saw that Fringe, there's going to be a Fringe TV cable station and all that. And people are coming out with these big ideas. They've been thinking about it, working it. Do you feel that there is now, are those ideas coming out that you're seeing, and would you mention any of those that you feel, or do you feel that there wasn't as much, or there wasn't that need for urgency, and a few people are really delving into this, the rest are kind of waiting? What's your sense kind of post, now it's been 5 months, of that same question of urgency?
You just said 5 months and my brain exploded.
I know. Remember it was going to be 2 weeks, and we're like, 2 weeks? Oh, a month? That's a little weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe it's still too soon. Maybe, and it's a loaded question, kind of.
Well, I've been, I've started thinking that, that maybe what's been really inspiring to me is to see that, we'll keep on making whether we're, produced or not. Right. So, or whether we're produced. We're producing now. So, right. And so I've now started on this jam of like, an acknowledgement of the fact that some institutions don't seem to be put, because the other, and again, and I know it's way, I'm not in these institutions, so I know that there's a lot of painful decisions that are being made on a day-to-day basis, and I'm I don't have to make those decisions. The decisions I have the luxury of going, can I afford to experiment on some things today and hope that maybe it's good, right? I mean, that's I'm like super luxury problem. So, but I have started thinking that the advocacy for I mean the advocacy for saying that we are a legitimate artistic movement in this country, and saying we need actual funding for that, and that we are able to make work in basements and have done for a very long time, but that doesn't mean that we should accept that. And just because we enjoy doing what we do doesn't mean that that we don't get paid for that. I'm feeling more emboldened to just say that demanding real government support. I mean, it's in some way I get very I start to feel very like this when I see that my friends in Berlin are going back to they've actually been employed for this entire time and received a vast majority of, the people who work for theaters, for state, and they receive like a level of their paycheck, and they're going back to work, and they're making things, and so, and again, who knows how long that lasts? I mean, this virus is very good at its job, so we'll see how long it lasts. But I just feel like they're in these conversations about, when we're talking about payroll protection and things like that, so many of us are freelancers. We're not on a payroll, so that doesn't help us, and in a country that has really decided that we'll just put all of the onus on you to get your own health insurance, to get your own, to fill out, to be self-employed, so that we don't have to. Be giving social. I mean, it's just the mentality is really not. I'm sorry. It's just really not conducive to being able to make work. Yeah. So and I think that that as there's a conversation, and I'm so proud of being in the theatrical community that is having a conversation about representation and about whose stories are being told and how they're being told, and about who is represented and how they're being represented. And I think that, and I know that in theater we're actually in some ways having a conversation, where in a lot of places that conversation is still not happening. So I think that, but I also am cautious, in my estimation, all of these things move for the advancement and the greater equality for all people. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we can start making more serious demands of our government, of where funding is coming from, how it's coming from. In the interim, I've decided that it's okay to say to people, if you're someone who maybe has some means, and you have habitually given to institutions which maybe aren't employing artists right now, maybe it's okay for you to take a little bit of that money that you would be giving to those institutions and give it directly to an artist who is engaged in making their own work. So, and whereas I used to kind of feel like I have to be in a place where I'm hired by a producer in order to be funded, or be awarded some grant in order to ask permission, all these type of things. Now I feel a little bit more emboldened to say, we are continuing to evolve a form and continuing to create community and continuing to create social engagement without any type of support. So why don't you just support us?
And again, I think that could be another whole episode in terms of that. So in terms of both of you as artists and next steps, what are you... Peter, did you have a comment to that?
Yeah,
sorry. Yeah, sorry. You're right. Thank you, Ashley. Direct me, Ashley.
I've forgotten the original prompt. Wait.
I don't remember what the original prompt was either.
It was the original prompt was actually, and you went with it, and I loved it. The original prompt was more of, you were worried about being the first ones out there artistically.
Oh.
The urgency of being there as an artist. And are you seeing that other artists are doing great work? Is there stuff out there? You mentioned a few names now. Yeah. Are there shows that the audience should be seeing, people they should be following, and then it will be a segue into what work are you guys working on? What's your next step? So kind of that, what should we be looking at? What were people, you were nervous, now it's 5 months have gone by, what has kind of come out?
I mean, from what Ashley has said, I feel like she and I have gone through a very similar experience in relation to of this kind of like, we're we were just creating, and then whatever came out got this response, and it was like this. Okay, there's this thing. How do we get it out so that other people can see it? But like it's still ours for a little bit.
Right.
And then as for me, as it started progressing, I started going like, okay, I want to get this tool out there because I thought more people were going to be able to jump on this faster. Right. And I don't think I've seen that. And so there's a part of me that's like, oh, we may not even be able to have the momentum of people who are jumping into this because there aren't enough people who know it, feel trained in it, feel comfortable in it, and are comfortable consuming it, even though actually that transition is relatively easy. But I don't think a lot of people, easy in the sense of if you're open to it, you can take all the skills that we already know and employ it.
Yeah.
So to me, there's more of an urgency of like, how do we build this industry that Venn diagrams with film and television and theater so that we can do everything that Ashley was just talking about of like, artists need to get paid, artists need jobs.
Yeah.
I started teaching a live video theater class for Perseverance Theater, and I had, I think, 5 classes with 15 students in them each, or 4 courses, series of the course. And so like there's 75 people out in the world now who have some basic foundational tools that I'm like, I hope you all are creating, because this is a viable either holder or a holder, even a new medium to add to our field that I think can employ people, keep people working, because as was alluded already, we can't turn to our government for that because we can't trust them to actually care for folks. We have to build that ourselves in a certain way. So I actually am hoping more people come forward with this excitement. I still feel like I see a lot of Brady Bunch theater, which I'm mixed about. I think it depends on the medium. I think if you're taking advantage of that in a really great way, wonderful. But if the illusion is that you're supposed to be in the same room with someone else and it's all straight to the camera, as Ashley, you put it really, really wonderfully, the audience has no idea where they are.
Right. Well, and to that, I want to use this time to throw up there Peter's website. You have some web pages that kind of talk about some of these basic techniques. And one of the reasons I approached you in the beginning, and also Andrew Shemecki, you guys were out there kind of training people. It wasn't just, I'm going to keep precious to this. I want to educate others. I don't know. Are you planning a workshop? Any future workshops?
Not right now. ACT is launching back into its season in the academic year. So everything I was doing before is slowing down slightly, just because my administrative directing and artistic work with them is just going to suddenly take off again. That being said, I still want to keep sharing this knowledge, and I want to keep helping folks get into this, because what I'm learning as I've been going through these classes is it really is like some foundational tools. And I don't think I have to. I was talking to a friend, and I was like, "Oh, I've been teaching these classes and consulting." And she said, "Peter, I'm not smart enough to steal what you have. I just need to listen to you talk about this for a little bit to generate some ideas." I'm like, "Great." And it was such an odd moment that I suddenly went, "Yeah, I can't, like, how many MFA directors exist in the world?" And wow, I'm about to say, like, there's a variety of perspectives and styles, and some of them work for a bigger audience and some of them don't work for others. And so it's, I don't, at first I was afraid, but now I'm not. I'm excited. I'm excited about what everyone else's different lens is going to be. I think what I'm more concerned of is people continue to create in the fashion that is trying to repeat a live in-theater person experience over and over again, because I don't know how successful that's going to be, and it's going to make this whole medium feel weighed down as opposed to the exciting new thing that it actually can be. Yeah,
there is some new exciting stuff. And in Love and Warcraft, you rumored it's coming back. Right? We're going to get to see that at some point.
Yes, single tickets go on sale tomorrow at ACT.
Okay. At ACT. And I'll ask both guests, send me any links and stuff. I'll post this to everybody out there on our YouTube page so you can be the first to do it. And Ashley, I've got a site for you. Do you want the one you just sent me, or do you want the original one?
No. The original one is good. That's just my URL, and I haven't I actually haven't updated it recently. I haven't put new work on it, but right now it's funny because I'm doing a mix of. I just did a project in Chatham, New York. Did an outdoor, socially distant, adherent live music performance with a band called Alarmal Sound. Of a John Luther Adams piece about birds, and so it was really exciting to be working with human beings and like seeing legs again. But then I'm also doing a mix of doing some live streaming. I've been hired to basically to do the live broadcast streaming and live kind of switching, live editing, to live directing of a remote show. That that's some work that's happening right now. But the thing that I'm engaged in personally is I have a studio. I have a residency in a studio in Red Hook, Brooklyn, and so I'm working. The link that I just sent you is liminalet.com, which is the person who coded the Zoom OSC for Mad Forest, which made us be able to do the switching. Andy Carluccio has started a business called Liminal Entertainment, and Zoom OSC is now available for free for people to use. And then he also has a number of other things that he works on. And so I'm in my studio in Red Hook setting up what we're calling a node, but we're basically decentralizing TV studio production. So I have, a green screen and a whole studio set up with a camera and blah, blah, blah. So I can work on things and work with other actors in different parts of the country. And Andy's in Virginia, and he's he's collecting the information and doing the switching. So we're engaged in experiments in that way. And then the other work that I'm engaged in right now, which is where I'm, just asking people if they'd be interested in funding such a thing, is an installation in this space. It's large enough that we can safely have a couple of viewers, and so doing a sonic and physical installation that has a 10-minute virtual reality layer on top of it, because that's another work that we can be engaging in right now. And so that's something that again, working with theater artists who are deciding, that doesn't mean that I'm only working in basements or whatever, but I can also learn how to. Afsun Pajofar is working on the VR for that, and I'm working with a composer who will be creating compositions specifically for what would be a VR layer, so much more intimate. And then there's another sound designer who will be making the sonic space for the room itself, and a performer who we're going to send a camera to, and she's going to. And I'll talk her through how to film herself with these capture devices. So that's a piece that I'm just making, hopefully. But I think it's right now it's just and then also working on what are like outdoor installation pieces that we can do and things like that. So because I feel like, I don't know, I guess there's a part of me that feels like let's do all the outdoor safe in-person stuff that we can do for now, and in kind of anticipation, unfortunately, of going back in the fall and the winter.
Yeah. That whole new realm of physical distance theater. I will say it is interesting. This has come up in several conversations. And you mentioned it a bit, Ashley, with this Zoom, the partner you had with that. The technology companies are starting to take heed that there are people performing. And I'm hoping to see a new advancement of some of these platforms that are taking in account. I haven't found any artists yet. I'm going to try to find them who are being approached by these tech companies of like, what can we do to make this easier for you?
I actually have had a conversation. I don't know if I didn't sign anything, so I assume, but I have been approached by tech companies who have asked exactly that. And the thing, what I was saying about working with Andy, who he's just, at the time he hadn't graduated yet, I think. He was a student of a video designer I worked with, who was a video designer at Mad Forest, Eamon Farrell, and but Andy is a theater major / computer science major. But what we're actually doing is what the liberal arts institution said should be the symbiotic relationship between the arts and technology or arts and sciences. Yeah. And we actually, and everything's so siloed in the pursuit of getting a degree that, that it doesn't actually happen. So I'm finding it to be really exciting that we can play that out, and I can say, here's the problem that should be solved. And you can go, okay, let me go figure it out and try to solve it, So I think that which is why I think it's really exciting, and it's kind of what a lot of people have said that they are working towards, and right now it's just like I feel like all sorts of barriers are falling down in interesting ways.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
I
do.
And I'm so sorry, I forgot. And I think I'm teaching a class at ACT actually in the fall. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I'm glad you guys got to meet each other beforehand. Talk a little bit. Well, we could continue talking more. This was phenomenal. I do have to say, without rubbing anybody the wrong way, I do feel that a lot of this, all that we're doing, exploring, wouldn't necessarily have happened the way it has without a pandemic. And that people are having conversations and exploring art and technology in ways that they haven't. I wish we didn't have this pandemic, but I hope we do leave it with a new sense of connection with each other, and a new sense of kind of exploring art in a different way. Theater's been talking for years about how do we get a younger audience? How do we reach a bigger audience? It's being thrust upon us. We are forced to do that. We're forced to have conversations we never had. And I'm just very excited that there's artists like Ashley and Peter out there leading the way, and with an open mind as artists exploring this technology, asking the right questions. I'm really excited to see more of your work. I want to get you both out here. We were going to talk about technology and using some of the platforms, but this was just a wonderful conversation. And again, thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Matt. And Peter, thanks again for the, thanks very much. I appreciate it. Appreciate you.
Of course. No, yes. I enjoy talking with you so much. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, guys. Bye, everyone.